CDM Smith, and I'm one of the modeling leads, responsible for a lot of the model development and construction calibration process that we're just going to have today.
And I'm Ken Rentiers, Deputy Director for Land Water Conservation at DNR, and I guess I would describe my role as being the DNR team leader and liaison to the General Assembly to try to get support and funding for the project.
I'm John Boyer. I'm the project manager for the CDM Smith team.
I'm Craig Westfall with CDM Smith, and I'm the technical director for the project.
I'm David Bays, Assistant Bureau Chief of Bureau of Water within DHEC. I guess I'm the project coordinator for DHEC and working with these folks. We also have on our team within DHEC Chuck Borman and Rob Devlin, so if you have any questions, you can also reach them.
And I'm Jeff Allen from Clemson University, leader of the stakeholder engagement process.
The first question is, all the information that is being gathered from the water utilities going to be used in the model?
Yes. The unimpaired flow development was a very data-extensive process. So all the historical information that was gathered from the water utilities, whether it be withdrawal or discharge information, or the location of the source when the plant came online, that's all being incorporated into the unimpaired flow development. The actual baseline model, we're mainly just representing your current operations, what your existing sources are, what your typical withdrawal and discharge is.
The only thing I'd add to that is the operating rules and things like drought management plans that we've been talking to some of you about will be also useful in the baseline model in putting some of the basic logic behind moving water throughout the basin. So the fundamental answer, as John said, is yes, everything that we've collected will be used in one way or the other, either for flows or for guiding the model through the basin.
Thank you. Another question was asked, will the PowerPoint presentations from today be made available to stakeholders? And yes, we can post them on the Saluda River Basin Water Availability Assessment, Surface Water Availability Assessment page of the website. Are models from Georgia and North Carolina going to be reconciled with the South Carolina model to lead to a regional model?
I won't speak to the concept of a regional model, but I will talk a little bit about how we will use information that was developed in Georgia and North Carolina. We will be using unimpaired flows from the Savannah River that have been developed for the Georgia water modeling exercise as part of our inputs to the Savannah Basin in South Carolina. We will be comparing wherever we can output from our Savannah model to available output from the Georgia model in Savannah to help be part of the validation process. In North Carolina, there are basins that originate in North Carolina and cross the border into South Carolina. And what we'll do there is use both two forms of input for us. We'll look at the unimpaired flows of the state line from the North Carolina models. We'll also look at the actual flows, the managed flows, over which there may not be as much regulatory control in South Carolina, and use those as boundary conditions in, I think, the three basins in North Carolina and South Carolina that originate in North Carolina. So we'll be using the information that's been developed in those other states as part and parcel of the input to the models in South Carolina that cross the state lines. I don't know, Kevin, David, if you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I could say we do have a good working relationship with Georgia and North Carolina. So for example, when Georgia did their modeling, we provided them the data from our side of the river on all of our withdrawals and discharges, and they're going to do the same for us. We have already had conversations with folks in North Carolina about getting So it's definitely been a collaborative process.
Thank you. When will the regional water planning process begin? After all basins modeled, or as each basin model is completed?
More than likely, it'll be after the basin models are completed. We are trying to make progress on some of the additional steps, but the actual regional plans will probably not begin until fall of 2016.
Okay, thank you. How will you tie waste load allocation to basin modeling, and when will this occur?
Yeah, there's no direct tie with waste load allocations. The modeling that's done to determine individual discharge permit waste loads is a different model, and this model will not be used directly for those waste loads. They'll continue as normal.
Will there be any attempt to coordinate model output with aquatic species models with respect to in-stream flow needs to support ecological integrity?
Well, one thing I would say is that there are minimum in-stream flows in the law. The 20, 30, 40% of the average flow already set in the statute as the minimum in-stream flows. So that is one aspect that you can test in the model runs when you're looking at constraining it against those scenarios. I don't know if there's any other uses.
Well, I would suggest that that's certainly be a part of the planning process when we get into putting together the regional plans and the state water plan itself. Obviously, aquatic species is very important to us at DNR and for all of us for that matter. So we'll try to incorporate as much as possible into the planning process.
Thank you. What will be the basis for critical flow conditions?
Well, I got a question. Yeah, I think you could. I think it's one of the utilities models that you could ask, you can constrain it against different things. So again, the 20, 30, 40% would be one critical condition. You would ask the model, well, if I have a new withdrawal here, for example, how often would I reach those flows and things like that. So there would be any number of ways you could test scenarios with the model.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are ways to extract the data from the model and look at it statistically to answer the question, how frequently will we be above or below a certain flow threshold without having to put that threshold in explicitly. Another way to do that would be to put a threshold in explicitly, like a 20, 30, 40 example, and have the model report back how frequently that threshold is crossed or satisfied. So that's the kind of information you can get. You can do that with any kind of flow condition, whether it's a critical flow condition or a regulatory requirement. The model will report back how often those flows are satisfied.
Thank you. What definition of legally available will be used? And will this account for riparian rights?
I'll just comment from a model perspective. There's a lot of flexibility there, and I think that's a decision that that DNR and DHEC will need to make. But certainly as a start, we're going to be putting in the permits that are associated with each of the water user nodes, and that provides the first level of constraint in the model on legal availability. The second level of complexity that we described was where there are priorities assigned to certain water uses or in-stream flows. For example, some of those thresholds that we just talked about, those were set as a as a high priority for a model simulation, the legal availability then would be driven by that, by making sure that that upstream legal availability would be a function of that downstream flow requirement. So, yeah.
I'll have one thing. One of the nice things about a model like this is there doesn't have to be just one set of priorities established as the input to the model. Those priorities can be changed, and by changing the priorities it uses, whether it's an in-stream flow versus a withdrawal, or withdrawal versus an in-stream flow, the model can be used to test the effectiveness of that policy and perhaps even the equity of that policy. But there's no one firm fixed set of priorities or rules that the model will be based on. Those are all variables that can be tested. And one of the benefits of having this tool be publicly available is that other users can change variables like that and do experimental runs to see what would happen with different sets of priorities.
Thank you. What happens to the model, or perhaps in the model, when the flow in a stream segment goes to zero, or i.e. when withdrawals exceed available flow?
Well, that could certainly happen in the model, depending on demands in the model and the drought conditions that are being simulated. And so the physical availability at any node is one of the two things well, one of three things really that dictates water being withdrawn, taken out of the river. Right? So it's physical availability, legal availability, and then the demand. So if flows go to zero, obviously, there's a shortage there for that particular water user, and that's shown in the model as an output, and would be an important thing to know for decision support.
And is there an expected certainty of the model and its predictions? And the question is asked for 80, 90, or 95% accuracy.
I was going to take that one. That's a hard one. I don't think any of us can sit here and give you a number right now. We're going to, as part of the validation process. We know what parameters in the model are uncertain. We know a lot of those are much greater than plus or minus 10 or 20% by themselves, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty going into the model, but what we'll do in the calibration validation process is do our best to improve the certainty, limit the uncertainty in the model results. But I can't give you a number.
Real quick, one way we can help better understand that uncertainty, even if we can't always quantify it, is to run sensitivity analyses with the model and try to understand what uncertainties really matter and which ones don't. And maybe those that really seem to affect the output, we do a little bit more rigorous analysis on the unimpairing of the flows, digging back into historical records a little more on those to add to the certainty. But the nice thing about a tool like this, a what-if tool, is you can understand where does that uncertainty really matter, because there are places where it really does and places where it doesn't matter nearly as much.
Will the model have the capability to recognize flow trends, either up or down, to provide warnings when minimum in-stream flows are being approached?
That's a good question. I don't know that we've really looked at that in any detail. One of the aspects that is in the law that if your permit is subject to a minimum midstream flow, that obviously that's gauged and you know when you have to cut back your withdrawals from the river. So establishing this early warning network would be an interesting use of the model, and it's something we can look at exploring, but we've certainly not had any robust conversations about that today.
Switching things a little bit, there's a number of questions in regards to agencies that are supplying data. And so what agencies are supplying data, and is that data available to the public? How current is the data that is being used?
far, most of the information that's been the most useful to the model has been DHEC's database of water withdrawals, their NPDES database of discharges. That data goes back to when reporting first started, which varies depending on the type of water use. But as I said, that's the primary data repository to begin building the model. The USGS obviously has been very instrumental in providing all of the stream flow information, again, which is first and foremost what the model is built on. And they do a great job of making that data readily available and easily to download. Outside of that, we contact each one of the water users to get their data. I can't speak to whether the data is freely available to everyone. I suppose, I guess it is, because it's a state project, right? We've tried to do a good job of summarizing all the data in the process of preparing the unimpaired flows, so that it's all compiled from 1925 through end of 2013. So if you're interested, that's all there, basically. Did I leave anything important out? Okay.
Just speaking of 1925, how do you define historic stream flow?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. What do you mean, or how do you define historic stream flow in the model?
The definition we're using, the working definition we're using for historic stream flow for this project is the period of time from today back through the longest recorded gauge in the basin. And in the Saluda, there's a gauge which is near Columbia that goes back to 1925. It's the longest record in the basin. And that defined the historic period that we're using for the model for the Saluda. We'll do the same type of procedure for each basin in the state.
I will just say, just to manage expectation, that for the calibration of the model, we may not be going back that far. It's going to depend on, again, that uncertainty thing, which probably increases the further back we go. So we'll figure out the period of historical record that we feel confident in, and that provides us with a good range of flow data for the actual calibration. But the full period will be available for running scenarios once that model is calibrated.
Two questions that consider timing. In the Saluda, when do you expect to have all data in the model?
Well, I think we're pretty confident we have all the data that we need to build the model now. Tim's in the process of then actually setting up the model, so we're still working through the unimpaired flows. At the same time, we're building the model. When the unimpaired flows are done, we're going to incorporate those into the model and go through the calibration phase. I think our schedule shows us wrapping up the Saluda sometime in July. One component of the overall Saluda is getting the unimpaired flows from the rod. So we're just now collecting information from the rod, waiting on that data to come in, and then we'll be developing the unimpaired flows, which will be one of the major inputs to the lower part of the Saluda Basin. So that may delay completion of the entire Saluda just a little bit.
And did you include, or will you include, flow data that is being collected by MS4s in the state, by municipal separate storm sewer system, stormwater permittees?
Right now, we don't anticipate that. We're just including flow data from the USGS.
Okay. What kind of documentation will be available for the unimpaired flow data set? And added to that, will stakeholders be able to comment on the UIF data set?
We will prepare a report, detailed report on the methodology and the final conclusions of each UIF data set for each basin. Those data sets will also be available as numerical packages in their own spreadsheets and also as input to the model. And they'll be available to anybody using the model that way. Could you repeat the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
Will stakeholders be able to comment on the unimpaired flow data set?
I would say yes, and that's what these stakeholder meetings are all about. So, anybody that has comments, make sure to give them to us.
I'll mention too that DNR has already posted an initial modeling report, which is kind of a big picture approach of how we're doing the models. The initial methodology technical memorandum for the Saluda River Basin, we'll follow that one up when the UIFs are finished with a final UIF methodology report, which goes into a little more specifics, and accompanying it is all the data. When the baseline models are calibrated to complete, there'll be a modeling report. And again, all that's being put up on DNR's website, so you can download them, read them, provide comments through the mechanisms that Clemson has established.
All right, thank you. This is kind of overall just a recap question. Can you explain the stage in the modeling process, the hydro modeling process for the Saluda, as well as what will occur for all of the basins? What has been done and what is yet to be done? And if you want, I can pull up any slide or anything that would visually help assist that response.
I think I understand the question being what stage of the process are we at in the Saluda and then throughout the whole state?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Saluda, we're, if I were to assign a percentage to it, I would say maybe 60% of the way there. The bulk of the work is actually developing the unimpaired flows, and we've made a lot of progress on that. Establishing the model framework, which we discussed today, is another component of that. That's complete. The final component then is finalizing the unimpaired flows and actually building, calibrating the model. All the data collection has pretty much been completed. For the rest of the basins, we have started data collection in the ESTO, in the Broad, and the PD. We've gotten some information on other basins from North Carolina. We're going to continue probably within the next month, starting to make data collection calls to water users and discharges in the Santee, Salcahatchee, and in the Savannah. So the data collection, I'd say, is probably 45–50% complete. We still have some work to go, but we hope to wrap that up by the end of the summer. This is a very kind of time-condensed project, so we've got a lot of work to do before next August.
Due to FERC relicensing and other initiatives, there are existing watershed models that the SWAM model does not. Let me rephrase this a little bit, or kind of condense this. Due to FERC relicensing and other initiatives, there are existing watershed models. If the SWAM model does not prove to produce the same results, is there an anticipated course for reconciliation or reprogramming and recalibrating with additional variables?
I think the reasons that we could encounter that the models would produce different results are different input data sets and different operating rules within the models. And wherever possible, we will look to compare our SWAM output with existing output from other models as part of the validation process. There's sort of internal validation that we can do as Tim walked you through, and there's external validation by comparing it with other analyses. The things to adjust if we find that there isn't a reasonable agreement between models are those two things. It's the inputs, the unimpaired flows. We go back and look at those and see if we've captured all of the impacts that impair the flows, and the operating rules. And many different ways to specify operating rules, especially with complex FERC relicensing processes, and make sure that those are in alignment too. So there are operational and input variables within the tool to adjust in such a case like that.
We sort of had this question from the very beginning about certain basins already having models completed for other reasons, and we're trying to be very clear these aren't set up to be competing models, and one's better than the others. these other models that have been developed to ask a very specific question or set of questions. The Corps of Engineers may use a set to look at reservoir management. Well, that's not the purpose of these models, for example. So we don't see these as being setting up any sort of conflicting circumstances.
Sort of in line with that question is, how will groundwater be considered in this model? Is there a time frame for bringing in groundwater aspects to the water assessment?
Groundwater really has to be modeled on its own separate framework. It's not going to be included, for example, as an element in this model. And as Ken laid out the plans, that there is an existing USGS model that could be potentially refined to the point where it's at a scale that's more usable, that would be comparable with the surface water model. And that's the avenue that's being looked at. It really needs to be, just the way models work. Groundwater and surface water models are not just one big model. They have to be modeled separately.
Thank you. Are there, specific to one location in the state, are there corrected USGS flows at the discharge of the Buzzards Roost Dam? Because the flow meter can be impacted by downstream flows below the gauge.
That's probably a question we'll have to get back to. I'm not sure of the specifics of that particular one. We can certainly look into it.
Okay, thank you. These two also go hand in hand. Are all model routines available for anyone to evaluate, open and available? And overall, how will the public access these models?
The second part of that question, how will the public access these models? The models, once they're complete and accepted by DNR and DHEC, will be actually put up in a cloud that you can access through contacting DHEC, getting a username, and then you'll be provided access to a cloud-based server where it'll run kind of in a virtual desktop environment. So it's not really downloadable, it's still running on a remote computer, but you can run it basically just like it's on your desktop. And the first part of the question was, would the repeat it again?
Sure. Will all model routines be available for anyone to evaluate?
So the baseline model will be what's developed. Anybody can look at that and use that. Not sure if that's answering the question or the code. Yeah, the code won't be made available. No.
And our final question for this afternoon, unless there's any further that I'll pass up. How were the 8 basins prioritized across the state? What was the methodology or considerations?
Well, I don't know if there was any particular magic to it other than, as John had stated in his presentation, the Saluda had an attractive blend of different features that are going to be encountered in all the other basins, so it seemed like a good place to start. The rest of it, we just sort of met and had what we thought would be a logical progression to work through the state. So.
And actually, since we do have just a few more minutes, an additional question was, will the state be adding flow gauges as a result of this study?
One of the things that we asked CDM Smith to be on the lookout for as they do the modeling is, are there any areas of a basin that just sort of cry out, boy, I wish we really had a gauge here. This would be particularly useful. So they're on the lookout for those, and through different funding streams and cooperative agreements, we could take that to the USGS and try to get some gauging stations set up, where, especially where they're critically identified, but you can never have too much data.
And I would just like to add again, the utilization of the sdwatermodels.com website. I believe there's a form on there where folks can ask questions directly to the website.
Not yet, but there will be.
Yeah, not yet. It's not quite functional yet. It will be soon. But there's also a direct email to the stakeholder engagement team, which I believe is scwatermodels@clemson.edu is the direct email. So any questions you have at any point in the process, please send those in to us, and we will aggregate those into our database that the stakeholder engagement team is working with. And again, then we will post answers in our FAQ section of the website. And I just want to thank everyone again for taking time on your schedule to be engaged in this very important process for the state.